Hey everyone, welcome to episode 20 of the LitRPG podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, author interviews. In new releases and reviews this week, I'll be giving you my opinion on The Dive, Birth of a Hero, Rune Universe, and Adventures of a Scribe. We'll begin though with LitRPG news. In LitRPG news, we begin with a story that Viridian Gate Online pre-order is up and ready to go. We talked about it a little bit last week, letting you know that it is going to be up. It's going to be out December the 23rd of 2016, but the pre-order is actually live now, so go pick it up. I've already kind of had a sneak peek at it. I really enjoyed it. I'll give you my full review next week, though, on that particular story. Viridian Gate Online Cataclysm by J.A. Hunter. Also in LitRPG news, we have the author of The Dive and World Sea, Justin Miller. He said that he plans to publish his newest story, World Keeper, on Amazon as soon as he finds a nice place to stop writing it currently. He's also asking fans of his two book series, The Dive, if they're interested in a print edition of the book. Now, if you are interested in that, or you're not, whatever the case is, Justin Miller does ask that you let him know by commenting on his author page. There's a nice discussion thread there that he's opened up for people who are fans of his work. Let him know if you're interested in getting a print edition of those books or anything else. Okay. Also in LitRPG news, we have Travis Bagwell, author of Awaken Online, one of my favorite books. He has completed the content portion of his second book in the Awaken Online series. That would be Awaken Online Book 2, Precipice. Now he says all he has to do is edit, and lots more editing. On his blog, he says that he hopes to have the book released by early 2017. So for those of you folks who keep asking on online forums and sending him messages, when's the next book coming out? Well, now you have a better idea. Okay, now additionally, we have a new listing for the upcoming LitRPG series. We have the Crystal Sphere, the Neurobook #1, a LitRPG series written by A. Levandi. Now, if you're a fan of the Phantom Server series, you know this author already. It is apparently going to be a prequel to that particular series. It is now if you're not familiar with Phantom Server series, it's another really good LitRPG series. It's a space sci-fi LitRPG that has great action scenes, a ton of cool story twist. It's one of my favorite sci-fi space adventure, battle kind of LitRPGs. Really interesting. Now this is not a prequel necessarily. To my reading of the description, it really seems like a fantasy-themed LitRPG set in the same universe. But again, that's just according to the description. I'll read it off to you so you can kind of get a better idea of what it's going to be about. Inhabited by clumsy dwarfs and cute alphas, the cyberspace of the Crystal Sphere, the latest state-of-the-art MMORPG, is not as benign as it might seem. Unbeknownst to most players, this is a test site for the latest technogenic device, the neuroimplant, allowing players to experience the full range of real-life sensations, including pain, exhaustion, and death. Okay. The description does say that it's a prequel to the Phantom Server. The Neuro series will shed a new light on many of the truths that the author has kept hidden from his earlier readers. New characters will join the team already familiar to that author, assisting them in their quest for survival until they discover the fatal truth. But again, it is a fantasy theme, so I like the fact that it's switching from sci-fi to fantasy. I always enjoy when authors of long-standing LitRPG series make a transition from one to the other, either fantasy to sci-fi or sci-fi to fantasy. I like those switches. It kind of gives me a new way of enjoying the author's ability to tell a story. It also gives them a new world to play in, generally. So it's fun for everybody. It is available now if you want to go check it out on Amazon, but it will not be out until March 10th, 2017. And if you can't wait till March to get your sample of this particular story, Magic Tome Books, the fine folks who are translating this book into English, they've put on their site the first couple chapters of the book just to tease you folks. It is the Crystal Sphere. We're going to link in our show notes for the Magic Dome link that gets you the first couple chapters, or you can go to their website, magicdomebooks.blogspot.ru, and you can try to find it yourself, but I'd encourage you to check in the show notes for the actual link, or in the show notes for the pre-order link. So there you go. Looking forward to this one as well. Now our last little bit of LitRPG news is straight for me. Adventures on Terra breaks into the top 100 paid on Amazon. This was amazing news for me. This past week I published that book of mine, Adventures on Terra, and this last weekend it broke into the top 100 best-selling books on all of Amazon. Now the other authors that I know have told me this is a really, really super big deal. It's not just a top in 100 in a particular category. It's all of Amazon apparently. Now, although we've dropped out of that particular top 100, it was kind of cool to be there while we were there. And I got to say thank you to everyone who bought the book, is reading on Kindle Unlimited, or was nice enough to leave a review of the book and their opinion on it. All those things have really helped to make this a successful first novel from me, your host of the LitRPG podcast. And without you folks, I could not have had as such success. So I just want to give you a heartfelt thank you very much. Oh, and the print edition of the book is out if that's something you want. It's kind of expensive, about $60, and I think I get like $1 from it. But I put it up for, I know some people totally love physical copies of things. So it's there if you want to go purchase it. I'll leave that decision up to you. But I did put it up there for you guys. Also, of course, full disclosure, this book was written by me. Okay, also we're going to read off the upcoming LitRPG list. Now, just a quick heads up, I'm going to change how I do this from now on. The list is kind of getting long, and some pre-orders are out like 4 or 5 months apparently in advance. So I'm really only going to start reading just what's coming out this month and next month. Anything that comes up for pre-order, of course, I'll let you know about it in the LitRPG news section. But all the other upcoming LitRPG, I'm just not going to read on the podcast. It'll still be in the show notes. It'll still be in the recommendation list, so you can still get like a nice feel of what's coming up even 3, 4, 5 months in advance. I just won't read on the podcast until we get a little bit closer to those actual dates. Okay, now in line with that, we have The Way of the Outcast, Mirror World Book 3, coming out December the 19th, just next week, folks. Actually, in 4 days, not even next week. Looking forward to that one. Viridian Gate Online, Cataclysm. Like I said, it's out December the 23rd. Desperate Times, a 49ers LitRPG novel, out December the 25th, just in time for your Christmas reading list. We also have Video Game Plotline Tester, The Dark Herbalist Book 1, January the 3rd, 2017. And Your In-Game LitRPG Stories from Best-Selling Authors. That's that short story LitRPG collection from Russian authors set in their particular worlds. It's going to be, though, a short story collection translated from Russian. So we'll read that one when it comes out. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. In new releases and reviews, we're going to begin with my review of the game audiobook edition. I did forget to put that in the earlier part, but I am reviewing it now. I let you know about this. That it came out a couple weeks ago, towards the end of November, and I've been listening to it ever since. It is 12 hours long and 25 minutes. The narrator is Nick Podell, written by, of course, Cosimo Yap, the author. I'm going to break the review for audiobooks again down into 2 sections, the story portion and then the narration portion. These are 2 distinct features that can ruin an audiobook for a listener. If the story is great, but the audio narration is not to their taste, it'll ruin the whole thing, even if it's an amazing story. Vice versa as well. The story could suck, but if the narration is good and it keeps you engaged, sometimes that's enough to salvage it. If you're not familiar with what the game is, it is actually spelled GAM3. If you're listening to this on just the audio version of it and you want to look it up, it's an amazing story. I'm a huge fan of it. It is one of my favorite sci-fi LitRPGs. It talks about there's been an alien invasion in the universe. Alan, a college student, he jumps into this virtual online game where the things that happen in the game affect the outside world, but it's more of a way that the aliens have stopped people from going to intergalactic war, so they can do all their violent decisions and conquer strategic points in the universe and actually control those points in the real world, but they're doing it in the game. And so it's a virtual world that's pretty open world, letting characters do whatever they want to, go on adventures, quests, political intrigue, get whatever skills they want to. And it's a really interesting sci-fi world. Like I said, the story portion of my review is that I love the game. It's one of my favorite sci-fi lit RPGs of all time. I love the detailed skill trees. There's seemingly endless possibilities. The story takes the main character Alan from Earth to a test with this custom AI, then to various alien planets where he battles robots, aliens, and gets caught up in some amazing adventures. I really enjoyed the ebook version when it came on Amazon. I was reading it on the Royal Road when it was first put out a long time ago, and it's an enjoyable ebook. Now, the audiobook version of it, again, is narrated by Nick Podell, and he does a great job of narrating. His voice almost perfectly matches what I expected main character Alan to sound like. And if anything, I actually like the audiobook more than the ebook version of it, which is rather rare for me. I'm usually reading the ebook versions or the print versions, whatever, far in advance, and I get pictures in my head, and that kind of sticks there. So when it changes from that, it's not usually as great. But with this audiobook version, it was it added such an extra layer of information and enjoyment. I can't recommend this enough. I was really sad when this audiobook ended. It got me through, of course, many long shifts at work at about 12 hours, 25 minutes. I listened to it about, 3-4 hours at a time, so it only took me a couple of days to get through. And unfortunately, again, I was sad when it ended. I would recommend this to anybody. There we go. On to my next review, The Dive, Birth of a Hero, from Justin Miller, of course. Now, this is the conclusion to his earlier work, The Dive, Birth of a Wordsmith. I'll read you the description. Follow Jin as he continues his adventures through the new virtual reality game, The Dive. On a journey to discover his purpose in this strange world, he will fight against man and monster alike, teaming up with the most unlikely of creatures. But every action has its consequences, and not everyone takes kindly to his choices. Okay, this is a 550-page book at $3.99 currently on Amazon. It is also available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, again, if you like the earlier book, The Dive, Birth of a Wordsmith, you're going to love this one, that's for sure. It is, in just about every way possible, a better book. Now, this is one of those series that you do have to read the earlier part, kind of get all the references they make in the second book. So you can't just pick this up and figure everything out. There are a lot too many relationship issues, why is he so powerful and overpowered, whatever it is. You do need to read The Birth of a Wordsmith first, and a lot of people are actually picking this up, but then going back and rereading that one to kind of refresh in their minds what everything's happening. But it is the conclusion of this particular series, for now, hopefully. Now, at the end of the last story, the entire party got wiped, and we were left on a real big cliffhanger. That's absolutely resolved in the first few pages of this book, and it's done pretty well, in my opinion. Now, not only is that resolved, but there's some interesting character developments that happen within the story as Jin continues his adventures, becoming more overpowered as the conflict between angels and demons intensifies. Now, the series does have an ending. It's a super epic battle. To me, it was a satisfying conclusion, but at the very end, the author still leaves plenty of room for another series set in the exact same world, which I love. Like, there's a total setup for, like, oh, these new characters enter the dive, and they go on their own adventures, or whatever happened. So there's plenty of room for the author to expand into the series, maybe with a different main character, maybe with the same main character. We never know what happens with the series. There's so much creative writing happening here. But The Dive, Birth of a Hero is definitely recommend, but I would recommend, of course, you reading the first book first before looking at this one. There we go. On to our next review, Rune Universe, a virtual reality novel, the Rune LitRPG series book 1, written by Hugo Huesca. Okay, this one is a slightly different kind of review. It is 502 pages, $2.99 US dollar. It is also available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, I like this book. I want to say that up front. This was very well written. I couldn't see any errors in my reading of it. No grammar, spelling, whatever. None of it that I caught personally. I loved parts of it. Other parts of it I found a little frustrating. Overall, though, it is an amazing. I should say it is amazing cyberpunk story, and that's a big part of it. As a lit RPG story, it left a lot to be desired, in my opinion. But again, it's a really good story. It's just not in a lit RPG way. It is still lit RPG technically, but I'm gonna get to it in a minute. Now, as I'm reading the story, I try to do my best to take as good notes as possible. Now, you have to know that as you're reading this book, you don't get to any kind of game world until about 20% into it. That's 1/5 of the book. And that's a big red flag, in my opinion, that this may not be entirely lit RPG. Eventually, you do get into the game world, and you get a few clues that there are game mechanics shown, and the character does technically progress according to those game mechanics, obviously. And those are the two qualifiers to make it a lit RPG, in my opinion. Those two things. In a game world with obviously stated mechanics, character progresses according to the game rules in an obvious way, not hidden away, background stuff. So technically, those things were hit, and this is a lit RPG. Again, 20% of the novel, the first 20% is backstory for the main character, why he's decided to enter this online VR game. He's from a bad neighborhood, he's had criminal dealings, he loves his mom and his sister, and will do anything to support them. This was a really good story. I'll even just had the author just taken that 20% and made it a short story, I would still love it a lot. It's really well done, but it's very cyberpunk. It's not lit RPG at all in that first 20% whatsoever. From there, he finds that his friend was murdered. He has to fill his last request, which is just find out why he was killed. Cole, the main character, has to log into the game, Rune universe, to do so. And again, it's a well-told backstory, but that's how you're going to spend the first 1/5 of this entire thing. So the first 100-ish pages of it. Now, as I got into about the 45, almost 50% point of this novel, I'd only seen the main character within that game world gain 3 skills. Hand-to-hand combat, shooting, and piloting. And while there is a little bit of crafting within the story, it's really not done in a very RPG-ish way. They go on quest to quest to get the materials, but everything puts together, and they continue on from there in trying to figure out what the big secret is behind this game. And I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who wants to read it. But as I'm reading through this thing, I kind of get the feeling that lit RPG elements were inserted into a cyberpunk story just enough to make it lit RPG. So it is lit RPG technically, but in the spirit of lit RPG, I don't almost feel like it qualifies. I'm not going to say it's not lit RPG. It's going to go on my recommendation list because I liked it and it is lit RPG. But it lacked a lot of the things that I really love about lit RPG. Things like levels, skill trees, detail crafting, the finer points of a magic system, all those game mechanics that make up an RPG system or in a video game system, whatever you're basically using for, they were missing from the story most of the time. Like the game world says, we don't have levels. We're a skill and ability based game, and that's perfectly fine. But I would have loved to have gotten more explanation about those skills, about those abilities, about the possible tree paths. Instead, I got a really good cyberpunk story and just like a sprinkling of little RPG elements every 100-ish pages or so, starting at the 20% mark. And so it didn't really it didn't hit all those things I love about lit RPG, which is unfortunate because it's a good cyberpunk story. It just didn't really fulfill my need as a lit RPG story. So that's my opinion. And again, it's a good, well-written novel. I want to make sure I'm very clear on that. I enjoyed reading it. It just didn't, get me my lit RPG fix. So there you go. That's my opinion of Rune Universe. Now on to the last story, Adventures of a Scribe, written by Michael Dehune. Sorry if I'm getting that name wrong, Michael. Essentially, this was my favorite read of the entire week. I absolutely fell in love with the story. I'm going to read you the description so you can get a feel for what the story is about. Edward Montague has grown up in a family of scribes, learning about the world around him through books in his family shop. Not wanting to be consigned to his fate scribbling away all day or managing the shop, he takes matters into his own hands. Striking forth into the world, he makes friends on his journey and experiences the joy of victory to the agony of defeat. I think it means from the victory, from the joy of victory to the agony of defeat, but that's how it actually reads. The authors actually just say that it's set in the fantasy LitRPG world, and he's nice kind of talks about what LitRPG is. So good for you, man. I appreciate that. This is a 226-page book, $5.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, this novel costs about double what I would normally pay for the page count, and it's not available on Kindle Unlimited. Yet despite that, I give it a wholehearted recommendation to anybody who's looking for a great LitRPG story. I'm really glad that I purchased it. I generally purchase these things for you guys because I want to give you a good review without you having to take the risk of spending so much money on 226 pages. Necessarily, when it's on Kindle Unlimited, it makes it a lot easier for me to review it, for everybody else to take a chance on it. But I understand that some authors want to put it in different places or don't want to take it off the web, so they don't like the Kindle Unlimited program. This novel really had me hooked from page one, and I mean that literally. From page one, this was interesting, even though it was just the author's introduction of some disclaimers in his story. It mixes LitRPG with a more culturally accurate medieval society. I'd even go as far as to describe it as a historical fiction LitRPG, and I loved it. Really, I did. In the preface, the author tells the reader that he intentionally includes some more historically accurate aspects of medieval life, that the age of adulthood in a realistic society would have been around 12 years old, and that drinking alcohol was a matter of survival since people poured their sewage into their water sources. And this is entirely true. It is a more recent development that the age of adulthood it's been raised to 18, 19, 20, whatever it is, and that's because, of course, extended technology, medical services, all that great stuff, like clean water and regular eating, things like that. But in an actual medieval society, lifespans were so short that, hey, as soon as you have puberty, or even before, you're a grown-up, go out into the world, go do your thing. And so he's bringing that sort of realism into his LitRPG story, and it works amazingly well. He even goes as far as to detail social customs and taboos around hoarding knowledge that I found utterly interesting and a unique way of describing a LitRPG, because he melds it perfectly with a real LitRPG system, as if that LitRPG system has existed for hundreds and hundreds of years. Social customs, taboos, all those normal social things have developed alongside this game system, where there are blue screens of information, levels, skill trees, abilities, all those great things that we love about LitRPG and RPG systems. Okay, again, there's plenty of things in there: levels, skills, magic, experience from killing monsters. And again, it's all handled perfectly. I loved every minute of it. If you want action, crafting, adventure, detailed magic systems, this novel has everything. And I really can't recommend this one enough. I mean, who really knew being a Scribe could be this cool? Okay, that's it, folks. That's it for the podcast. Thank you very much for watching and listening. The podcast, remember, only exists because you guys and your support. And thank you for, listening to me talk about something I love, and hopefully you do too. If you want to learn about all the ways you can support this particular podcast, you can do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. But until the next time I see you, folks, talk to you. Remember, go read some LitRPG.